how to find and close on foreclosure deals. So what we're going to be talking about today. What we're going to be covering is the foreclosure process, finding foreclosure properties. We're going to jump into closing on foreclosures and a whole lot more. I'm really interested in your thoughts on this. Please type in the comments. Let me know what you're thinking, questions you may have. Really appreciate it. First off, what is a foreclosure? So a foreclosure is a process. It is not a single event. So it's not just foreclosure. It's a process of things occurring. So let's talk about this foreclosure process. It starts out with a borrower being in default. This is typically they're over 120 days behind, which is 4 months. They're behind on making payments. It's 120 days. They haven't made payments for 4 months. At some point after that 4 months, now, can it be done on month one? Yes. The minute that they're in default, yes, but typically the banks are not going to be that aggressive. The Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac may not want them or let them do that, but they can be legally, right? So then what happens is after they're late, then what happens is a lis pendens or a notice of default gets published. Now, these two things are public information. Just depends on the state that you're in. Lis pendens means legal actions coming. Notice of default is putting everybody on notice. Hey, this borrower is behind. So anybody that may have any dealings with this person, we may start taking some action. So you need to know that. Now, then after some time, after that notice of default, or lis pendens is actually filed. It could be months, it could be years, but next what's going to happen is publish what's called a notice of sale. It's going to be different timeframes in every state, and it's also going to be different timeframes based upon the bank that you're dealing with and what they want to do. Then what actually happens is after the publication of the sale happens, then we get into what's called the foreclosure sale. This is when the foreclosure actually occurs and then the property gets sold to the highest bidder, which could be the bank or could be another bidder that is at that property, okay? Let's talk more about this. So after they've missed some of those payments, they're in default, they're late, and if the homeowner doesn't do any type of a modification where they're working with a bank to say, hey, let's redo these payments, lis pendens and notice of defaults are public information. Get it from the courthouse, or you can hit the easy button and get them off Investor's Edge. Now, when the sale actually takes place, what happens here, it depends on the state. There's judicial states and there's non-judicial states. Judicial state, it's got to go in front of a judge. A non-judicial state, it does not have to go in front of a judge unless there is some type of a dispute or a problem with it, and it's handled by the attorneys in the process unless that gets challenged, and then it could go in front of a judge at that point. The sale happens to whoever the highest bidder is, okay? Whoever's the highest bidder. That highest bidder may be the bank, or the highest bidder may be somebody else, and they would be required to bring the money to the bank so that they could have their money out of it, and the highest bidder then ends up with the property. Now, who sets those starting bids? Well, the bank does, and the bank can start low all the way up to what's owed to them with fees and attorney's fees and taxes and interest and all that type of stuff that they may have paid. All that can be charged, and then if there's anything over that, then they can't bid over that amount in most cases. Now, who can go bid on these properties? Well, banks and anybody with enough money. Now, when I say enough money, this is a situation where you can only bid at the foreclosure sale if you have the cash. You have to have the money in your bank account. You're not going to be getting a hard money loan on this. You're not going to be getting a private loan, and here's why. You aren't able to see inside the property when it's in a foreclosure situation like this because somebody else owns the property. And as a matter of fact, if they don't move out after you own the property, you may have to do an eviction and get them out of the property. And then from there, you may have to do what's called a personal property eviction to get them out of the property. Now, anybody that's giving you a loan is going to want to get inside the property and see what's going on. They want to be able to have a scope of work and know what work's being done to the property. And in addition to that, they're going to want to make sure that they get full title insurance. When you're buying at a foreclosure sale, there is no title insurance. And who knows, you might be buying a second mortgage. There's been a lot of investors that have done that thinking they were getting a first mortgage, and they actually got a second mortgage, which ends up being worthless because the first was in foreclosure as well. You got to be very careful with these things. This is not a game for newbies. The other thing you want to make sure is you're getting hazard insurance, that you have a property that would be insurable and that there's a hazard insurance company in case it burns to the ground. Whoever lent that money is going to want to make sure they get that. Now, what I find is with foreclosures like this, it's not going to meet those qualifications where a lender is going to be able to do the loan. Now, typically, the bank will start with what's owed to them. And if somebody bids more, they have to have cash. They have to have it typically with the next day. It's a little different depending upon what state you're in. We don't recommend public auctions for new investors. We just don't. And the reason is you got to put money that's non-refundable. You can't get inside the property. There's no title insurance, hazard insurance, as I talked about. There's just a lot of risk involved with doing that. But that doesn't mean we can't find foreclosure properties as they're going through the process as well. So let's talk about finding foreclosures. Now, first off, we'll talk a little bit about pre-foreclosures. What is a pre-foreclosure? That's when the notice of default actually happens. That's a pre-foreclosure. Now, when the notice of sale happens, that's going to be a pre-foreclosure. And then when the sale actually takes place, that's when it becomes an REO property, which means real estate owned, where the bank takes that property back, or it will sell to the highest bidder as long as the bank's getting out of that what they wanted to get out of it. I shouldn't say wanted, what they're willing to take for it, because they may be taking a loss on that. Now, how do you contact these homeowners? Well, notice of default is public information. This is early. Some people bury their head in the sand and wait. And other people are like, I just want to get this over with and get it done. Now, with the notice of sale, it's typically 30 to 60 days before the sale actually happens. And now they've got a lot of motivation to make this happen, but you can run into a little bit of a problem here because you've got to close this deal pretty quickly. So depending upon how recent the notice of sale has happened, you're gonna have a really quick closing. So you've got to be aware of that. Now, sometimes you're able to get the trustee or to get the bank to do a extension and not do the sale on that date and extend it for 30 days if there's a willing buyer and a willing seller, and it's going to work out for everybody, but is not always the case. What I'm trying to make sure you understand here is there's a ticking time bomb when you're dealing with the notice of sales. I'm not saying you shouldn't go after those. I actually think you should go after those, but no, time is of the essence and you got to move quick on those, whereas the notice of default, you don't have as much time. Now, the notice of sales, if you just chase those, people may have already taken care of it when there's a notice of default. And if you only chase the notice of default, people may not have as much urgency as they would with some of the notice of sales. So what do I recommend? I recommend you do it all. I recommend you go after people that have the notice of default. I recommend you follow up with those people and see if that turns into a notice of sale. And if it turns into a notice of sale, you get even more aggressive, because if you can get out there and get their phone numbers, it's going to help you get in touch with these people even faster, or you can do what's called a skip trace. It is a ninja secret. If you don't know about it, check out a few videos that I've got on it. Now, you want to make a deal with a seller to get the loans paid. And if you can get them a few dollars in their pocket on top of that, they are going to be super, super happy. I think those are the deals that really happen, is like, you're in foreclosure, the bank's owed a whole bunch of money, it's getting more every single day. There is some equity in this. I can give you a little bit of money to walk away. Let's make this sale happen. I'll pay the bank off in full, and you will be able to walk from this deal with a little bit of coin in your pocket. Now, that's not always the case, but if you can, that is great. Now, after the sale becomes an REO if the bank wins the properties. REOs, banks do not want the properties. They want their money back and they want a return on their property, their investment. They want to get money back and make a return on it. So how do banks get rid of properties? Well, one of the things they do is they list what are called REO agents, which is real estate owned, or they hire what's called an auction company. Now, this is not a foreclosure auction company. This is called a private auction, not a public auction. A public auction is one that's happening at the courthouse steps. A private auction is one that's a private party is actually selling it, which could be a private party, could be the bank, and they've hired an auction company to sell a number of properties for them. The other thing, depending on if it's an FHA or if it's a VA property, it goes to what's called the HUD Home Store. On the HUD Home Store, and that's going to be VA, FHA properties. Now, you've got to build relationships with these REO agents. How do you find them? These are agents that actually specialize in REO properties. Well, here's REO Network. That's a way you could find some of these REO agents, REO brokers, so you can make relationships with them. Sometimes these REO brokers will know about the listing before it even comes available because they're asked to do values and those things. Sometimes they may be able to get you into a property early so that you can get a jump on things. Now, they still have to present all offers. They've got to be ethical, all those types of things. But having friends is really helpful. Now let's jump into LinkedIn REO networks. There's different REO networks that are LinkedIn. You can see this is a worldwide one, but you could change that and say, hey, I only want the one that's in your state, Ohio, New Jersey, wherever you may be. This is another network of REO agents, REO Pro Network, default professionals. So basically what they're saying, hey, when a property goes into default, we're the type of people that you need to call because we are going to take care of you. And they're going after banks and hedge funds that have properties. Now, REO Network typically gives agents the ability to pay for some type of a membership, and then they get publicized as an REO. And the REO network's goal is to help agents make more money or help agents get more business, okay? So you can also market directly to the bank, but I have not found that very useful unless it's like a small community bank where you can walk in and talk to them, or maybe like a local credit union where you can get in touch with the right person. But for the most part, I find going after the banks is not the best strategy. I think it's better to go after that pre-foreclosure or look for those private auctions that are happening. Now, these private auctions, you need to look at them daily, okay? There's several different sites. I recommend you look at them daily and see what is available. This is one, auction.com. I bought properties from them. Williams & Williams or Williams Auctions, I bought property from them. Hubzu, I have not bought from, but it's one that you should be checking on a regular basis. And RealtyBid is another one where they actually have these. Now, are you always going to be able to find properties in your area? It really depends, like what got foreclosed on, what happened to those, and are they selling them through an auction? Sometimes there can be a lot and sometimes there may not be any, but it's a great way to jump on properties early. The other thing you want to do is check the HUD Home Store daily. The HUD Home Store is going to be those FHA and those VA properties that came back into a foreclosure. They're getting sold here. Now, homeowners do get a preference. If you're buying to live in the home, you get a jump start. If you're not buying to live in the home, you're a secondary bid after the primary bids for people that are going to be moving in the property. Either way, all of these websites are ones you should be checking on a daily basis. Okay, so how do we actually go through the closing process? Well, first thing you've got to do before you do anything is get approved with a hard money lender. Before you go find a property or anything else, get approved through a hard money lender. Next, you're going to want to get access to proof of funds, which says, hey, yes, I've got funds that can back me up. The seller's going to want to see that. The bank's going to want to see that. Then you're going to want to get an inspection done on the property. You want to get inside the property, get a scope of work together, hire an inspector to go look at it, crawl under the crawl space, get up and on top of the roof, look at these things. The other thing you've got to do is get full title insurance, which is one of the reasons why at the county courthouse steps or when we're dealing with a public auction, that doesn't work because you can't get those things. You want to be dealing on a private auction because they typically give that to you or their seller's willing to provide that. Okay. You also want to get homeowners insurance before the foreclosure sale actually happens. So we want to be direct marketing to Liz Pendant's notice of defaults and notice of sales. Now, let's do a quick recap because I have unloaded a lot of information here. How to find and close on foreclosure deals. You've got to get public information. Okay. This is the Liz Pendant's. This is the notice of sales. You want to build relationships with REO agents. Take them to lunch. Get to know them. Let them say, hey, when you get properties, call me. I'm going to jump all over those. You also want to be checking those auction sites and sales sites on a daily basis to see what's out there. The Williams & Williams, the Hubzu, the auction.com, because there can be a lot of properties going through there. And then make sure you're approved with a hard money lender, which you were supposed to do earlier. So I don't know why I put it here. Get that access to the proof of funds and have an inspections period to see the property. Make sure your lender's good with the property. Make sure you're getting full title insurance. And that's what you're going to need to be going after these foreclosure type deals.